Welcome to the Collingwood Rant. I'm Sly.
And it's only an island if you look at it from a water spook.
Spook, how fucking good was that first half
Be
against the
fucking
West
good,
Coast?
mate. Fucking good. Fucking good, mate. It was brilliant. I read a few people liken it to the best football they've seen Collingwood play since 2011. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it's certainly up there. That was a brilliant performance.
I think it is the best football we've played since 11. It's
All right,
probably a
let me change my
handful.
statement. Can you just put that rewind sound back on and I'll do it again?
Probably a handful of games. The 218 prelim. Can't really think of. The funny thing is 218 for all. We finished top four, and I seriously can't recall any game specifically other than we might have won this or that. It wasn't like there was a lot of exciting games. I can go back to 211 and I can recall 5-6 games clearly. The game against Adelaide where we kicked 11 goals in the last quarter.
Yep.
Smashing North by 100 points, smashing Port by 100 points in the wet. The two Carlton games, I recall that first Carlton game where they had the motivational speaker for Carlton in the rooms, and he was revving up the players, and he was revving them up by showing them the tipping chart from the Herald Sun, and no one that tipped Carlton. It was like, well, see this, no one's tipped you. I'm sort of thinking, well, you are playing the reigning premiers and the rampaging favourites. Why the fuck would anyone? How would that be motivational? Anyway,
Nobody's tipped you. You go out and prove why.
I just found that unusual. I mean, it's not like, everyone tipped the wooden spooner against Carlton. Anyway, ball movement is just beautiful. I mean, the players constantly look to the inside to find the way through. They go for some delightful passes, over their opposition, trying to find space and to create some urgency. Can't remember who the commentators were, but I think James Rochelle was on that. But, they talked about how solid that back six was. Throwing Howe back in there has really just shored up a lot of that experience we had the previous week with Anton Tuhill playing his first game.
Yeah, it wasn't Brayshaw. It was Gary Lyon and the big chieftain
and Dunstall. Yeah. So
it was a Foxtel thing. So we had a semblance of intelligence when it came to the commentary.
Yeah, and the amount of times we kicked someone up forward on a lead where they just totally burned off their opponent. The West Coast defender was 5 meters behind them and just gave it up. It was really, seriously, you look at that and you think, one, we've been talking about the list and how problematic it is. The list looks a lot better than we probably would have given it credit for. Obviously, there's
and that's also based on the fact you look at the people that are out and the roles that are being played at the moment. It's a completely almost different side.
Yeah, and you have some key outs like with Darcy Moore, and obviously we still have some deficiency, key position, and all that sort of stuff. But some of these other guys, Trey Rusco, he's been a revelation down in defence.
Calm as.
Yeah, Oliver Henry, it's just been scintillating.
McRae,
I thought McRae was the real standout of the young guys in terms of, in previous games, he knew how to find the ball, but I think his disposal was a bit iffy, but some of his kicking was just beautiful. That weighted past the Mychek in the top of the square. Kicking to the right of screen. The first goal that we got where he had the ball and it looked like he was going to blaze away, and he actually just stopped and had a look, and you saw, I think it was Noble running on the outside toward the half forward flank, and McRae hooked his kick and Noble marked and then set it up from Hoskin Elliott to take a mark. So it showed a collective intelligence that I think has been lacking for the last 10 years, even in 218, which was our best year for the last 10 years, we still too often either blazed away or got caught in cycles of kicking the ball across ground and then coming back and kicking it across ground, and then someone going, okay, I'll just boot it 50 meters now anyway and hope for the best. It was surgical the way they sliced open the center and moved the ball quickly and directly and got that overlap running, and then as they went forward, I mean, earlier on, I think Cameron Mooney was saying they blazed away a little bit, but then they readjusted and they're finding players in the lead. It was seriously impressive. And I understand that West Coast might not have been at their best and they can have down games and all that, but, we still have to put it together, and we did. So
No,
really impressed. And the thing, since I know people will say, well, this was happening when Buckley was there, the Melbourne game and all that. And I think, okay, we played a decent game against Melbourne. I don't think we moved the ball anywhere like this.
no,
Um,
surgical precision.
yep. And I think since Harvey's taken over, we've talked about this before. We don't actually understand the angst that he gets, given no one knows anything about him. No one knows what sort of coach he is or whatever. He just seems to draw the eye. And I understand there can be criticisms on him in terms of longevity, which we've made the point of. You do need fresh ideas and that coming through. But since he's taken over, that first game, I think it was against St Kilda, and the first three quarters were just more of the same as stagnant ball movement. And then we just sort of exploded in the last quarter and we fell just short, but it was pretty exciting. And then since that game, played Richmond, where we played really well for three quarters. And then that fourth quarter, we just, blew them off the park. Carlton, we generally played pretty well, except for a lapse in the third quarter where Sam Walter ran a mark, and that's going to happen being a young side.
Yep.
You're really going to be impressive with the way Harvey's revolutionised what's going on. And we have been mentioning this from the start. They are trying to be different. They are trying to do different things. And he's done things, like he tried Mason Cox up forward for a couple of weeks with Cameron, and he dropped Callum Brown and he threw Rusco back, and he's, playing the young guys in the midfield and all that sort of stuff. You got to give him credit because he's actually done a remarkable job. And I don't mean by any way we're close to winning a flag or anything like that with the status quo, but given what we'd seen for about 12 weeks, it's really impressive.
Oh, it's a huge turnaround. I think the other thing is you've really got to start questioning about, this is a bloke that's been there 148 years. You really start to wonder about how much his opinion was listened to, because he obviously has a semblance of understanding about what the list is capable of and what he's trying to get out of it. And it's, it obviously took a few weeks to shake the old wonderful game plan out of their systems, and they're really embracing the attacking, hard running game. I think there was even a passage, I think, where Main, he loves to go backwards. He actually did, and DeGoey came over and berated him for it. That you're clearly not living the value of what we want to set out to achieve here, which was, it's quite encouraging to see that sort of shift. And the shift happened relatively quickly in the scheme of things, to uproot a game plan and implement a new one, and to have it it's starting to bear fruit within a period of, what has it been now, 4 or 5 weeks? It's a fairly hefty sort of turnaround. I'm impressed.
Yeah,
I didn't think it'd happen.
No, I didn't think it'd happen either. I thought, would maybe try to be a little bit different. I mean, this is very different to even what we saw against Melbourne, which, you'd consider our best when given we beat the top team. And the thing is, a number of players are playing like with new lease of life. You mentioned DeGoey. DeGoey just, he'd have to be considered an elite midfielder on his form for the last 5-6 weeks.
Well, considering how average his season's been up until the last, it was 5-6 weeks, he's now sitting in the top 20 of the Coaches Association votes. That's the impact that he's had in the last 4 weeks. It's certainly been meteoric. And I mean, he's really just showing us what we'd all hope he was going to be capable of, and delivering it consistently and in the midfield.
Well, the other thing you mentioned that too is when he berated Main. He's never, as far as I'm aware, he's never really been sort of that vocal motivator and general on field, but he was really showcasing that also. He took some ownership, and he provided some leadership, which was going to be lacking now that Pendlebury was out. And, he really led that midfield. You look at him and you think, if you can be that player for the next 4 or 5 years, then, hey, if Nick Dacos coming in, and there's other players like Josh Dacos and McRae and all that coming up, you think, well, maybe the midfield's not going to be in the horrific shape that we thought it was going to be just, a month or so ago.
Happy with that. I mean, the other thing too is also, I think for the first time in a while, the senior players really stood up.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to get to fall in love with the performance of the kids, but you'd be remiss to overlook the impact that Sidebottom had.
Yeah, I was going to just bring him up. Sidebottom
Immediate
was...
return of Howe and the difference that he made in stabilising down back. Maynard was just dynamite, absolutely brilliant.
And Crisp also.
Yeah, and Crispy. I mean, Crispy, geez, I mean, he will win the Copeland by an absolute country mile.
Yeah.
This year, and probably very deservedly so.
Yeah, and we can't omit the probably the most important change to the side was leaving out Rosebery as an umpire. I thought that was pivotal to the game. But look, I mean, obviously we're a long way from contending, and you look at the side as it stands and you think, okay, I have a lot more optimism going into the future and looking at the future. And, you sort of start to look at maybe, hey, the stuff the club did last year, while you're not going to excuse them for the poor returns and the messy optics around Treloar's exit and, the poor returns for Treloar and Stevenson and Phillips and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, I still think even like trading their first rounder, even if it was going to be a top, a number 12 pick or something, which is probably what they expected it was going to be, I still think they probably gave it away a little bit too cheaply. But then on the flip side, you're going to go, well, you know what? They've picked up all these players. If they can get a couple of them to sort of not just be players, but to actually be next level players, then you're going to look back at this and think, well, maybe they fucking knew what they were doing and all your criticism was just totally unjustified, Spook.
Oh, that's exactly what I said last week. You just repeated it. I can't believe I just made up a new word. I look, obviously totally agree. History will judge whether it's a right or wrong decision. I think, you obviously get caught up in the emotion of losing some quality. But Jesus, the first pick's probably a foregone. It was going no matter what towards Nick Davis.
Nick Davis, we're bringing him back, are we?
I think how many times have I done it now? Nick Dacos. Damn this microphone. You've made the best of something, and it's actually looking like you've made the best of something. It's tracking beautifully at the moment, which, you're blooding the youngsters. They're showing something. Look, there was a period in the third quarter against the Eagles that the machine broke down and, obviously they started to tire and that. But what I really felt encouraged with is that probably that last 10 minutes of the last quarter, they found the mojo. And once they sort of got that confidence going and they pretty much finished the game the way, not necessarily the way they started, but when they hit that peak of ball movement, that's how they finished. And I thought that was great. You could have probably easily rolled over and just made it a 2-goal win, but they maintained a pretty good margin. That'd be our biggest win for the year too, wouldn't it?
Probably our biggest win for 100 years. I mean, the thing that really impressed me too is what I actually, I'm sure probably a lot of people concerned was, you kick the first 2 free goals and you think, okay, West Coast will hit back here. And kept waiting for that inevitable comeback, or that what I had a greater fear was going to happen was that we'd get like the 3-4 goals and West Coast would be nothing. And then the players would get a little bit protective rather than remaining offensive. And it'll get in their heads, like it might have happened back in 2018 in the grand final, where it was like, oh, we're 5 goals up. Instead of let's make that 10 goals up, it was like, let's just protect this and make sure we don't fuck it up and go defensively into their shells and then allow the other team in. We just kept attacking and attacking and attacking. It was just really beautiful to watch. And obviously, there are going to be times you're going to play better sides and they're going to counter attack and you're going to need to find some tempo and all that. But just, I thought that first half was just, in terms of our temperament, was just brilliant. And in terms of, just ruffling West Coast and keeping them ruffled, really, I think might have gotten into their heads also, just like, fuck, this is not going to be our day. And you can imagine that does happen sometimes where players go, geez, they're just running over the top of us. What the fuck do we do?
No, that's brilliant. I mean, you look at, again, just going back to Maynard for a second, he kept Darling to 8 possessions, and Darling kicked a goal. That was that one time where Maynard was on the bench. He just destroyed him.
Yeah.
They really, like Kennedy, what did he do? Normally he carves us up. He did nothing. It was just amazing the way that, obviously, there was no hiding the fact that West Coast are a little bit on struggle street, and there's something going on there that's keeping them a little bit off kilter. But you can only beat who's out there. And they've
had a couple of pretty good weeks. So I know like they've lost. They got smashed by Sydney 3 weeks ago, but since then I think they've been West Coast have been St Kilda, and I can't remember the other one is. So they can be sporadic, but I think it's also important that you look at like West Coast are a little bit got that bully mentality. If you let them, if you give them that space, they will bully you, and then you're constantly reacting. Where we just did, we bullied them, and Gary Lyon and Jason Dunstall constantly made the point of how well we were playing. And there was an article today on SEN, Tim Watson and Gary Lyon were talking about the way Robert Harvey has reinvigorated the side, and the players are playing with more flair. And then they started speculating on Buckley as maybe he got too defensive, and got into the players' heads to an extent that
I doubt.
Yeah, they really started second guessing themselves. And I think if you look at like the way they're playing, the thing you realise with footballers is the bulk of footballers would have been playing in teams since they were kids, 6, 7, 8. They instinctively hone their understanding of the game and their responses and all that. So by the time they get in the AFL system, they should have a pretty good understanding of what they can and can't do. And then the coaches mould them and bring out their best, or mitigate their worst or whatever, but that's the coach's job. But it felt like under Buckley, particularly this year, is they lost all sense of instinct and reflex. And they really, every time they got the ball, it was like turn around, look to a flank or look to a wing and kick it across and just possess it. And it was like, okay, we've possessed it. And nobody had the, I don't know what you'd call it, the license or the audacity or just the natural instinct to go, no, I'm going to go for a long kick, because they've just been smothered out of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you even look at Grundy with a hell of a lot more solid performance, and I think he lost the hit-outs to Nick Nat, and what, fucking great. But I think in terms of comparative performances, Grundy had the upper hand clearly.
Yeah,
and I'd rather that. I don't give a fuck about the hit-out stats.
Well, it's good.
One of the more irrelevant stats going around.
And the commentators are making the point of mentioning that too, that hit-out stats really are irrelevant, because you got to look at hit-outs to advantage and to hit-outs to disadvantage.
And that's not recorded, yep.
Yeah, and I mean, the 219 prelim, you look at that game as the perfect example of where Grundy got whatever it was, 80 tap-outs or something. It's like, well, what did that mean for us? Fucking nothing. So it's more important that, if you're going to win head-outs, it goes to someone. And if you're not going to win head-outs, that you contribute in other ways. And Grundy did that. Grundy was great. And, I mean, Nick Nat generally has the wood over him, but Grundy showed him up around the ground. You could see, like, Nick Nat just wasn't running as hard as he should have to keep up with Grundy. And Grundy got to that, to the best we've seen him, where he was contributing more as a ruck rover also.
Yep, I agree. I mean, at one point he was calling him Nick Crap. He had all bases covered.
And that's the joke of Lockdown 5. What next week? Playing Hawthorn and our former
Clarkson Cup.
The Clarkson Cup, or Lee Matthews Cup, it should be. I mean, he was at both clubs. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, people speculate about whether we can end up wooden spooners. There's a few things that have to fall. Would have to totally fall in a heap, and things would have to go really well for the teams below us for us to finish wooden spooners. Then again, if you're looking at extremes, we could actually still make the finals if a lot of bad shit happens. 3 games
out of the 8 still.
Yeah. So Hawthorn's been generally pretty good the last about a month or so. Outside of that one game, I think, against Fremantle, which was it right after their succession plan was
well, it's a weekly thing now, these succession plans. Everyone's having a crack at it.
Yeah, well, it was good to hear, Jeff Kennett come out and accredit the succession plan with the 1983 flag. So had a great bearing on how they approached that grand final 40 years ago.
That's it.
But they've been pretty good. So what are your thoughts going into this game?
Well, I mean, look, I probably had it penciled in as probably a likely win. But then, like, I didn't see the game, but I was following the scores. Hawthorn pants Brisbane, who have a lot more to play for. Now, obviously, what's happened with Clarkson and Mitchell has stirred a bit of emotion. You can often have that throw breakout sort of game like what we did with Melbourne and diminish the following week. I'm hoping that's going to be the case with them, that they fired their shot in that. I believe we can still conceivably drop to the spoon if some strange permutations occur, but I'd rather look. I probably thought we safely put it to bed last week with the expectation that Hawthorn would lose, but them winning's probably throwing a spanner in the works. That I hope we come out and make another statement this week and say fuck it. I want to see the form that we look. If they lose, so be it. But as long as they play the way they played last week, I'd be happy. I still think the spoon is a distinct. It's a remote possibility. I don't think we're.
A lot of things have to go favourably for North Melbourne.
Well, that's
Adelaide
it.
Also,
I think they've got. I think they've both got about one winnable game each, and then it's a little bit of struggle chance. So I don't think the bottom half is going to really shift all that much.
Well, North and Adelaide also play.
I'm happy to watch Richmond continue their trajectory down.
Yeah, North and Adelaide also play one another, so that's going to hurt one of them. In terms of the way we played, one of the things that really disappoints me when you look at it retrospectively is you go back to nearly win the grand final 18 and you think, okay, you got a pretty good formula here to contend again, and you've added Roughhead and Moore and Elliott to 2019 side, but then they played that really defensive game, and as the season went on, that just more and more deteriorated into this extremely defensive mindset. And you look at the prelim where you almost spontaneously combusted because of the way we were playing, and for like about 20 minutes in the last quarter, we just went for it, and we almost snatched the win back. And you look at 2020 also, really the ball movement was very defensive and all that. You sort of look at those 2 and a bit years and half of this year, and you think, geez, if you really pursued this sort of game style, you see the players obviously embraced it and prefer to enjoy it, and they do enjoy it. What have we fucked up in terms of losing the best possible return for this club by playing that shit that we played for almost 3 years?
I have no idea what it was meant to achieve.
And that's the thing. What you said then just before was, I don't mind if they lose, if they, keep trying to play this, this way. And it's like, okay, totally agree. Now, we chose not to play this way, but what the fuck did that get us? That didn't get us anything greater or better. It had a few improbable losses, sorry. I recall losing to Fremantle, I think it was 2019, when we were meant to be, premiership favourites. And Fremantle can't win at the MCG, and yet they beat us. So it's like, what? It just sort of like I look at it and it's just like, what a great potential loss of a return because we elected to play too defensively and really smothered players. And, in terms of development, how much did that impinge players so they didn't realise their best? Anyway, what's your tip for against Hawthorn?
I think we'll win by 80 points.
That's unusual from you. So it is actually in Tasmania, which obviously Hawthorn's played there a few times. I don't recall the last time we played there.
I don't think we ever have.
Sure that we've never played there. Well, that's some list.
I don't know. I don't have, well, not in recent times. I'm sure we've probably played some sort of exhibition match there or something in the past, but I don't recall in modern times as ever going there. Because I've always said with the with you and the boys and stuff, it would have been a River Boys weekend away, or Person's weekend, or they weekend away, whatever it is the correct terminology is these days. To just jump on a plane, pop over to Tassie, hit a bar and watch the footy and fly back home. It'd be a ripper little getaway. So in that era of that mindset, it's never happened as far as I can recall. So
it's really only happening out of necessity because of COVID now.
Well, I was about to say exactly that. That was obviously I think it was only announced last week, wasn't it? That's the case. So I think you got to look at it this way too: is that technically we haven't lost a game in Tasmania.
Well, no, it was Harves. Harves he loves Tasmania.
No, he's got a flawless win record there.
Again, credit to Robert Harvey because I think he's done in a very short space of time. I think he's done a lot of great work, and in terms of a coach for the club, I still want him to be looking, outside the gene pool. But I hope Harvey gets a gig somewhere because I think he's shown that he's probably worth a punt.
Yeah, no, look, I agree. I've been pleasantly surprised.
And the one thing I should add, I can't remember which commentator, it might have been, I can't remember if it was Cam Mooney or someone, but they just said, he mentioned some forwards from St Kilda and just said, this forward said Robert Harvey was the best player to receive a pass from just because of the way he kicked it. And I think the greatest revolution in that game, to go back to that game, is just our passing. It was just, side bottom did that beautiful pass. I can't think it was Elliott marked it, but going forward, never got more than a metre off the ground. There's some delightfully low flat passes, and when they weren't low and flat, they just beautifully weighted where they dropped into position. And players, and that's that wasn't happening under Buckley even when we were good. So it's just, I think you got to credit Harvey for. To me, it seems like every time we watch it in any game where you sort of see an issue, it gets addressed that week in whatever they do, training or debriefings or whatever, and the next week you see a better representation of that facet of the game. So
and clearly too, I think. Harvey doesn't come across as a great orator. Is that the word? When you
I don't know if you pronounce it like that, but that's
orator or whatever.
Speaker.
Potato. When he talks, he's not really a commanding presence, but maybe you tend to find a lot of coaches talk a lot of blustery nonsense. It's like sounds impressive, but really the content. It just really doesn't maybe deliver a message to the playing group. And I think Harvey must communicate at a level that's easily understandable. And the intent of what he's trying to get across is seems to be absorbed relatively quickly. So, good on him. I certainly, look, I wouldn't have believed it. I thought that this would be it. No one would take him after this, but he'd have to be engaging some interest.
And I mean, obviously, you should point out there's probably other facets that are contributing. We're not playing for finals, so we've got a lot of youth in there. So there's other stuff contributing, but again, there has to be some direction, and that's obviously coming from the senior coach. So,
as a caretaker, it's been successful.
Oh, it's been great.
But I don't think anyone's entertaining the notion that there's something wonderful for him is going to happen there. I think it's pretty much, you've done well, and you've exceeded expectation in the area. Look, maybe they might retain him in some capacity if he's not offered anything. But surely, I think for his development too, because he's been with us for 942 years, that it wouldn't hurt him to leave and go somewhere else at any rate.
I think you'll definitely get another assistant position.
Definitely. Yeah.
I just think the thing is when next time he goes for a senior job, now that he has this on his CV, he'll be considered a lot more seriously. For whatever reason, there's a lot of coaches, a lot of prospects who are very often bridesmaids in terms of going for, Hinkley at Port Adelaide was another one. He went for about 28 jobs and didn't get a single one of them. And I think with Port Adelaide, he initially declined to go for the job because he'd been sick of, getting the runaround or getting turned down. And I think too, because there's such room for interpretation in terms of how good these people will be, there's obviously still a great degree of error because there's plenty of coaches who've been appointed and within 2 years or so, it's been shown that they're not a good fit.
Or it's too early.
Yeah. And then you look at other people who haven't been appointed immediately, but then gotten jobs later on. And Hinkley's another good example. It just, they show like, oh, maybe if they got the opportunity earlier, they could have been a good prospect. Anyway, good luck to Harves for the rest of the year. I've got to say one thing. I actually enjoy watching them, enjoy tuning in and seeing what's going to happen next.
Totally agree. I'm really enjoyed the other night. It was great to feel that way again.
Yeah, I haven't felt this optimistic since before Disney bought Star Wars.
Yeah, that turned out brilliantly.
Next for the Collingwood Rant, we have a special guest. Welcome to David Hatley, aka the Collingwood Turtle. Welcome, Turts.
Good evening, guys. Good to join you after a Collingwood win.
Isn't it?
That is unusual. So last week, we begun the story of how the petition group began, which started back in October. We formed a chat group. Turts, you were one of the first people invited to the group. So that would have been like in late October, early November. And at that stage, although there was a lot of anger from a lot of Collingwood supporters, and some of us got, the guys have known each other for, 10, 20 years, there wasn't actually a lot of traction in terms of having a focus on how to spill the board. That didn't really occur until we had an accumulation of missteps from the club, and they culminated with the appointment of Bridie O'Donnell to a board position. Turts, that acted as the trigger for you to go, well, enough's enough.
Yeah, that's probably a good summation of it all. Yeah, we were sort of chatting over those sort of few months as we have over the message boards over the years. Yeah, and that appointment of Bridie O'Donnell to that casual vacancy, it was probably the tipping point for it, and the way it was done at the time, where it was sort of revealed that she hadn't been a board member for 2 years. Hadn't been a social club member for 2 years. And then just the social media sort of side of things, where there was a few excerpts of her over the journey potting Collingwood supporters. That really irked me and quite a few of us, and that sort of was the realisation that we might have to do something here.
And to be fair to Miss O'Donnell, Eddie Maguire throughout his entire tenure had appointed board members who didn't fit the criteria eligibility, but which were later ratified at the AGM. So as far as that went, it wasn't anything different for Collingwood. Probably the big problem there is with the new board, they probably should have just said, well, we're not going to do things the way Eddie did. We're going to do things a little bit differently. But with that being the tipping point, there was no grand plan at this stage in the group. It was you taking the initiative, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that night we were just sort of all sort of chipping in with comments with one another, and I think I just might have just said, hang on, let's actually do something about this. Let's start a petition to spill the board. And I think I might have made a post on Facebook, and that sort of grew legs there. And then I think the next day we chatted even more in the group. And it's I think it might have been a Wednesday night that sort of news come out about the board appointment, and I think by the Friday, we decided, that we were actually going to do a physical petition at the MCG on that Sunday against Port Adelaide, and we were hoping to get an electronic signature capture done as well, which happened as well.
So it really was very spontaneous in terms of the way it originated. We've been together for 6 months in that group, and it really was just sort of typical discussion that you get among Collingwood supporters, the sort that's probably happening all over the country following our exploits. And then the day, because I was there on the Sunday with the signatures, we've talked about the mood a little bit, but how did you generally find people? Because, wasn't even getting the sense. It was very obvious. There was quite a bit of anger directed at the club at that point.
Yeah, there seemed to be a lot of disenchantment with the club. A lot of people they felt disconnected with the club. I think by the sheer volume of people that came that day, I was actually quite surprised. And, there was a big cross-section of members. You had, your younger ones. You probably even had members up to, 60 or 70-year-old members that wanted to sign the petition.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mention it at the time when we interviewed you last, out of respect for him, because he was still coach, I believe. But I had a couple of people come up after they signed and said, now, where do I sign to get rid of Nathan Buckley? And I mean, I'm not joking about that. So there was people who were, because I think it's important to recognise the reasons for disenfranchisement with the club, which Buckley would have been one, Eddie Maguire would have been another, Ned Guy, Jeff Walsh. So at that time, Buckley was still there, and there was speculation that they were going to re-sign him for 2 years, which I think aggravated quite a few people. You were planning to go back for more signatures for the Collingwood Geelong game, but then we went into lockdown. We did have the digital petition running. I believe it's actually even still running. But at this stage, you were very firm in believing the board needed the spill.
Yeah. Obviously, just by the sheer weight of numbers, I think we were probably around that stage. We might have had already 1,200, 1,300 signatures, whether it was, on paper or online. And I was still fairly sure that, we've got to push ahead and do this EGM and spill all the positions. But one thing that I walked into it doing the petition, that I was going to listen to a lot of people. And as it so happened, obviously with the media exposure that we got, and certainly myself, that I was contacted by a vast sort of variety of people. I had, past players, past board directors, current people from the club, some staff members. So, it was really interesting and enlightening to hear different people's views. Some people were pro EGM, some people weren't for the EGM.
So around this point, also Mark Corder reached out to you to have a meeting with you.
Yep, that's right.
Yep. So you went to the Lexus or Holden Centre or whatever we're calling it right now. You met with Corder and Stephen Riley, I believe it is.
Yeah, Stephen Riley. Yep, the media manager. Yep.
Now, I've been reading the message boards quite a bit, and apparently Mark Corder is the evilest man alive. When he came out, did they just wheel him out on a gurney, like strapped to a gurney with a Hannibal Lecter mask on his face?
For all of the the sort of criticism of Mark Corder, there was a bit of a sensing out period, because I went there with Ross Katsambarnis and Tony Consolo, and they were seen coming out of the meeting with me at the end of it. But yeah, like during the meeting, I think they were trying to find out where we were coming from. Once they sort of got the gist that whilst we were looking to spill the positions on the board, we were raising quite a few items that members had raised to us, and our concerns about the social club membership department, salary cap, Dane Beams. There's been a lot of things that we've already covered. But yeah, I found Corder, I think initially was a bit reticent to sort of understand where we're coming from. But by the end of it, I think whilst we disagreed on certain things, we both agreed that what we were going to try to do was try to get the best result for Collingwood.
Did he ask you about the lambs? or maybe even the kebab? Did he ask you about a bad kebab you might have had? He wasn't sinister at all, didn't come across as trying to bully you like other presidents might, or talk over you or anything like that. So you had
there was nothing like that. It was a fairly cordial meeting. There was no heated arguments or anything like that. So we got to present all the issues that we wanted to raise. They gave their reasons for some of the things that happened over the journey, and we took that on board.
So one of the things that was happening concurrent to this is I was talking to Richard Stremski, who's the author of Kill for Collingwood, former board member, former club historian, and he felt like he'd pretty eloquently explained to me that, he felt an EGM was bad and that at this stage we'd given the club a shake and they were willing to have a dialogue with us. He asked me to put him in contact with you. And I don't know if it was around lockdown time again, but you had a pretty lengthy conversation with him. How did you find his input?
Oh, to speak to someone with the knowledge and the background of Richard was very good. I probably spoke to him for, I reckon it was at least an hour. And yeah, we spoke about a whole heap of things about, about board governance, his time at Collingwood, his understanding of the current position at Collingwood, the ramifications of having an EGM. So probably at that point, whilst I probably said to Richard that we were going to push on with the EGM, I was probably after hearing what he had to say and actually probably speaking to a couple of past players, I was probably doubting my sort of role in the whole EGM. And that was probably the one of the first seeds of it. And it was just that where he was coming from and his knowledge. And I think I said to Richard that, I'm trying to listen to as many people as I can and just trying to garner as much information as I can to make an informed opinion.
Well, it's probably worth mentioning at this point too that the EGM group was unanimous in the belief that the EGM was the right thing to do around this time still.
Yeah. I was gradually moving away from it because I was talking so regularly to Richard. And
well, let me just rephrase that statement. Everyone except Sly.
Yeah. But in terms of because Richard obviously has had such a long-term relationship with the club and because of his first-hand knowledge, I've felt like he was speaking from experience. And I felt the stuff he was saying also was very relevant because, he said pretty much what started to happen was, look, the club's now listening to you, speak to them, and you can actually agitate for change diplomatically. So I was looking at, no one in the EGM group, I believe, I can't speak for everyone, but I believe no one wants to burn the club down. Everyone's got the same long-term goal, which is let's have a strong Collingwood. It's just the different journeys we're taking there. But in regards to you were sort of talking about, you also spoke to some former players, so you're getting a lot more input from a lot of different sources. And
that's right. I was speaking to players who are obviously supporting the current board, but I was also speaking to past players who were aligned with the Jeff Brown ticket. So I was getting information from both sides of the perspective. So I was getting a greater insight to the whole scenario than probably the guys that were within the group, and I made promises to those people that I wouldn't divulge things in the press or externally out of respect for them, because they put their trust in me to give up some information, and I said, well, I'll be fair to you, and I still won't name these people because I got faith in them, and like we said earlier, we've all got the interests of Collingwood at heart. It's just the different paths that we want to take with it.
So you've been speaking to a lot of different people. You're getting a lot of different information. You're getting a lot of different input. And then at this stage, Paul LeCurie and Peter Murphy reach out to you to have a conversation. And again, we won't sort of go into the nitty-gritty of that conversation, but that was really the point where you started to turn away from the EGM and thinking, okay, there's a different pathway here that we could follow.
Yeah, well, I think through obviously we'd gone down that path of a couple of weeks of collating all the signatures, and we'd approached the board to get a list of the members' signature details, and then I think Paul LeCurie and Peter Murphy decided to reach out to myself and have a meeting. Yeah, so at that meeting, they went through quite a lot of things in detail, which sort of gave me greater insight into some of the decisions that the club had made around salary cap situations, around trading of players, and I got the feeling after speaking to those guys, it would have been probably for about 90 minutes, that they were understanding the actual angst of the members, and they actually were going to do something about it. Paul Licuria, grew up as a Collingwood supporter, played at the club, has worked in various areas at the club, VFL area, and now is a vice president. Some of the things that I said to him that the members weren't happy about, he was literally horrified that that the members were unhappy, and it got to such a point. And he was basically like actually quite upset and said, well, we're going to sort this out. So, Peter Murphy's very much the same. Like when we were sort of raising issues, he was saying, okay, this is a time where we've got the opportunity to actually hear the members and what they've got to say. And I walked out of that meeting thinking these guys get it, and in the past where people may have raised things for whatever reasons that hadn't got to board level, and that's why we had the angst of why the EGM sort of all kicked off. Initially.
So with Licuria and Murphy, you felt that they were a little bit more ground level with yourself in terms of Paul Licuria, as you said, a lifetime Collingwood fan. I don't know of the pathways that Murphy and Quarter have taken, but you felt he's more sort of a grassroots, relatable supporter like yourself.
Oh, for sure. And this is probably not to denigrate Mark Quarter, but I just felt a better rapport with Paul Licuria and Peter Murphy, especially with Licuria. He seemed to get the fact that how upset that the members were and genuinely wanted to rectify the issues. He sort of explained that he'd been a board director only for a few years now. He's a vice president now, and you can see that he's stepping up to the role and embracing the role.
So can I just I'll just ask a quick question. Are you sure that the sincerity was there, that you weren't being played? It wasn't a great snow job. Now I've seen Licker on. He's just missed out on a few Academy Award nominations for the leading roles. He is a good actor. You were convinced of the sincerity?
100% consistent in his beliefs. He's a guy of integrity, Paul Licuria, and just the way he conveyed his anger and disappointment that the members weren't actually being listened to in the past, and his willingness to personally basically say, it's on my head if these things don't get sorted out, made me walk out of that meeting and say, okay, this guy gets it and wants to do the right thing by the members. So that was probably the end for me, where I decided that night over. I probably didn't really actually sleep that whole night. It was a Friday night when we had the meeting. I reckon it was a Saturday morning pretty early that I decided to send a message to the guys in our group and just say, put the cards on the table and say, yep, I can't lead this EGM petition anymore because of the reasons after the meeting I had with Licuria and Murphy.
So there were a number of things you suggested to Licuria and Murphy, and you've gone back to the group and you've said, well, look, we've talked about these things and they're going to address them. What was the group's response, like collectively, individually? How did they respond to you deciding, well, there's a diplomatic route now? So how do you feel about their response to you following that?
Oh, well, I knew that whatever path I took, whether going ahead with the EGM or if I decided to pull out, which I did, was going to be polarising, whether it was people externally or people within the group. And when I was punching out those words and sending it to the group, I knew there was going to be guys disappointed, and there were, because they obviously wanted to push ahead with the EGM. So there was quite a few guys disappointed disappointed with it. But I think I conveyed at the time that I'm very comfortable with my position and my decision, and I still am now on weight of the information from all the segments around the club and externally, internally. So I'm quite satisfied where I landed with it all. And if people want to disagree, that's their opinion, and that's why I ended up handing over the signatures to the other guys.
So I'll say from my perspective, I remember that night, or that day well, rather. I've known you for a number of years now, and I've known you only as a person of integrity. That if you were making that decision, and I remember thinking that there's something that right off the bat, my first thought was, well, I'm going to respect that. I was probably a little bit disappointed that the trajectory had changed, but ultimately it made me think that if you've encountered something that swayed you, it's something worth listening to and exploring a little bit further. Because I don't think that you'd. I know that I remember that day that there was clearly a sound of jingling coins in your pocket.
Well, I was going to get to that too.
But no, I think at the time it was just clearly, no, there's something more to this and something that needs to be explored. Now, I do recall there was anger from other members about it, and that there was a belief that there was no right to change the course there. But I personally thought that there's something here that we should be exploring.
So I just want to go over that. So, Terts, were you paid anything by the club?
Oh, it's quite ridiculous, actually. That some people have made those assertions.
Yes, I can't believe
I've had people. Yeah. No, I can categorically state that I've received not 1 cent, no inducement, nothing from Collingwood Football Club, nothing from Mark Corder, nothing from Paula Curia, nothing from Peter Murphy whatsoever. Membership paid or anything like that.
You didn't get
no Palmers for.
Not even an Eddie Maguire badge?
No.
You didn't get the new Collingwood credit card that they're releasing. It's you get it. It's 112% overdraft.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I and you know what, I initially, there was people making comments on social media, and for the most part, it was people who had no idea who I was really. Well, I didn't know them, and they were just obviously making assumptions that somehow that they'd coerced me into getting out of the EGM. But I can categorically say I've received nothing, and I would have felt very disappointed if Collingwood had have actually tried to do that, but. There's no way the likes of Curie or Murphy would do that.
Yeah, we're not Carlton, and you don't feel that you don't. Again, just to reiterate, and you don't feel you're manipulated whatsoever.
No, well, there was one thing with that meeting that I went to that I actually took someone else with me to that meeting. That was to actually ensure that that. That someone else could verify everything that was said at the meeting. That okay, whether at that point I was still going on with the EGM, so I wasn't even really thinking about pulling out really. But I wanted someone there to make sure that we're all on the same page, and and also to offer up different opinions, because I mean, whilst I was the leader of the group, I wasn't the sole person. Driving it, everyone's opinions had to be explained to LaCuria and Murphy at the time. So that's why I had someone else there just to chip in, just in case I'd forgotten something.
So, and you don't feel, so you put a few things forward to the club about, what you felt they needed to address. You don't feel that was a bribe, but they were going to address those things.
No, I saw it. And I think I try to convey it to the guys in the group was that it was a willingness that they realised that yes, there had been mistakes made, right, but they were willing to rectify them, and they wanted to do something about it in the future. And it wasn't to say, oh yeah, you just shut down the EGM, right? Because even when I walked away from the EGM, right, I had Paul Curia ring me, 2 or 3 days, or 2 or 3 times for the next 2 weeks, and some other people involved at Collingwood saying, don't worry about it. Even if you're out of the EGM, the things that we've committed to benefit the members, we still want to do, because that's what we're about. And that sort of solidified my faith in what the club were trying to do.
And that was a thing at the time, is after, or you talked to the club, and then it was actually leaked that you'd walked away. And I recall Caroline Wilson was talking about it on Footy Classified.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's ever been substantiated who leaked it. I know the club was accused of it, but I've talked to a number of people who, Spook and I talk about it, is it didn't benefit the club to leak something which is going to put you in a bad light, put them in a bad light, and, invite all these aspersions. So I'm just sort of, I felt that was, farcical that, people were sort of going, the club leaked. I just can't imagine they would have done that.
Yeah, well, there's obviously people within our group that knew that I was going to that meeting. Obviously, Licura and Murphy, and then there was also someone from the Brown camp that I was transparent about, because that was one thing that I wanted to be, is when I was speaking to both parties. If I was saying that I was going to have a meeting with Collingwood, I would let the Brown camp know. And conversely, if I was going to meet, say, with Licura, I'd say, well, I'm going to be chatting to the Brown guys, just in terms of transparency.
So Paul Licura also asked you to convey an offer that he was happy to speak to anybody in the group.
That's right. Yeah.
And you put that out to the group.
Yep. I put a message out to the guys that Paul would be willing to sit down, have a coffee with anyone, and just have a chat like he did to me.
And how many people took up that offer?
I think it might have been 3 out of probably how many would have been in the group? About 15, I suppose. And
so, you can name 2 of them if you want.
Yeah, well, there was a couple of wise guys called Les and Spook.
I don't know about this Les guy, but so I said to you, yep, I'm happy to talk to him, and you conveyed my message to him, and I told Spook, and Spook wanted to come along. We arranged to sit down with him, and the first thing I said, and he brought Ben Johnson along also, and the first thing Licura said was, I said to Licura was, we're not here on behalf of the group. I actually just wanted to talk about Collingwood. People would know that I've had long-term criticisms of the club. And Spook also has had long-term criticisms of the club.
Really?
Yep. Going into that meeting, Spook, see, I was already leaning away from the EGM because of my conversations, particularly with Richard Stremski. You were still pretty much, hey, let's probably go for an EGM at that time.
Yeah, definitely. I approached it with guarded cynicism. I think that's probably a safe way of putting it.
I've known you for about 20 years. There's no guardedness about your cynicism.
So, yeah, it's fair to say that the defensive barriers are well and truly set. I expected to come across a conversation that was going to try and heavily influence a change in direction that we had more or less committed to. And I was after going through and hearing a lot of the stories and explanations around some of the things that have happened and why they happened in particular ways. I think I walked away, just to really encapsulate that whole discussion quickly. I walked away thinking that, much to my surprise, that this doesn't feel like something that's beneficial to move forward with. The way I was viewing it at that point is the EGM or the holding of the signatures was it's almost like it's a tradable commodity. You don't have to hand them over and say, well, that's it, it's a done deal. We're not going to pursue with this any further or anything like that. but it was an outlet that really woke the club up. It made them listen to the concerns of the supporter base that I think they were a little bit oblivious to, and it was a point of discussion there that was there, and they were very receptive around wanting to address some of these issues, and the honesty brought forth in that initial discussion was incredibly refreshing from my perspective. It was like I expected a raft of excuses, or deflections rather, or attempts to smooth the waters or whatnot. But all you got was brutal honesty, I thought. And it was good to hear some of this stuff. It was actually, how I'd been feeling. It's not just about the way I'm feeling now, or the way that I know Sly and I often talk about, that there were other people in positions of influence that were feeling this pain as well. And that made you think that, look, we could all work together here on something. We don't have to draw battle lines or cause an unnecessary conflict. We can collectively work together as a group, and maybe the outcome at the end of it all is amicable to all parties.
The thing that impressed me, as I said, like I went there it's open. I said, I'm not here on behalf of the group. I want to speak about Collingwood's cultural identity and why we are who we are and how we've become that way and why we perpetuate the same failures and that sort of thing. And the thing I was extremely impressed about was Paul Licura really seemed to, not to empathise, I mean, he articulated a lot of things that Spook and I and others have complained about for 30 years or something, and you could see he felt very similarly in a lot of regards. And I was thinking, well, here's a guy that's actually in a position of power, because he could take Collingwood somewhere that it hasn't been before.
No,
and that's something I don't. Not meaning to disrespect Jeff Brown, because he hasn't said anything, so I can't comment on what on how he feels about the club and where he's going to take it and all that sort of thing. But the one thing I've always been very, very wary of is the big identity coming in going, I will do it because I'm the big identity. And Collingwood people gravitate to that. I mean, the thing that really frustrates me in relation to support of Jeff Brown from a lot of people is people are going, oh, yeah, they want Jeff Brown. Okay, what's he stand for? We don't know. Then how can you know that you want him? You can't, you're just basically saying you want Quarter out and all that sort of thing. But that really impressed me. So after that meeting, we decided, Spook and I just rang you up, Kurtz, and we said, okay, you know what? We're now on the same page as you. We decided to talk with the group on a Sunday and through Zoom, because there's so many of us and we're spread, and I don't know if we're in lockdown. It seems we are every other week. And we put forward to the group, hey, we feel there's another way forward here. And the group felt that there was an obligation to the signees, the people who'd signed the petition, what was it, about 6 weeks earlier or something, and that we should see that through. Were you disappointed, Turts, that other people didn't even hear out Licura, weren't willing to just listen to what he had to say?
Yeah, I think they should have given him the opportunity, like even if it's half an hour or whatever it is, they should have given him the chance to actually portray and show what he was actually going to do to remedy some of these issues, and like he did for us. I think some of the guys, they were just so hell-bent on actually pulling down the current board and not actually opening up their minds to any sort of rationale around thinking that this current board could actually do something, beneficial. So, it was disappointing.
One thing with Paul Licura, I mean, and not sort of really divulging anything because it's been reported in the press, they did talk about sort of going through the process with, the coach, finding a new coach and that sort of thing. And yeah, that really impressed me, because we've never gone through a process at the club. It's always we've just headhunted and taken someone. We pretty much headhunted Buckley. I mean, Eddie's gone through his revisionism with Brad Scott and James Hurler in the picture, and I just don't think that was the case. Nick Malthouse was pretty much headhunted. I believe we were going after Dennis Pagan previously, according to Richard Stremski, but we couldn't get him, so went to Nick. Prior to that, Tony Shaw was pretty much ushered into the role, and then Matthews was effectively headhunted. So we've always done it. So it was very impressive to hear someone go, you know what, whoever it is, we're going to interview them and find the best person for the job. And I was like, well, you can't ask for any less than that. So when I say criticism of the coaching process on boards and that, I think, well, you know what, there's none of that favoritism. There's none of that headhunting going on at this point. They're just going through a rigorous process, which is great. The other thing too, Turts, is the other person who contacted you again was Hannibal Corder. He offered to also speak to people too.
Actually, I'd forgotten it. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, actually, Mark Corder actually. That would have been. It would have been after the meeting I had with Murphy and Licurious, probably about a week or so later, and he was willing to have a chat with all the guys in the group as well, because he obviously wanted to after the meeting that we had initially, we had some people that obviously wanted to still pursue the EGM. At that stage, Mark had known that I was out of it, and similarly to the way that I think Licuria and Murphy wanted to have a chat, Mark was actually quite open, to speak to anyone within the group as well. And yeah, again, it was disappointing that no one decided to take up that opportunity.
So, and I'm sure there's going to be cynical people out there like Spook and others who are thinking, well, Licuria, Murphy, Corder, they're just trying to pick off the group one by one and flip them. How would you respond to that?
I would totally disagree with that, because the sentiments and the conversations that I had with all of them, and I must say this: the second conversation I had with Mark Corder, after the initial meeting we had in the boardroom, it was one of he was understanding that I think we were trying to do a lot of things and make a lot of suggestions that were going to be beneficial for the club, and he saw that some of the other guys in the group, obviously were totally against what had happened in the past, but he just wanted to have the opportunity to have a chat to them, and see what, probably some specific answers that were conveyed to us, personally, that maybe that those people who were so reticent against him and the club, that maybe they'd get a better understanding.
I mean, well,
unfortunately,
yeah, I was going to say, well, that's what it comes down to. I mean, you've spoken to numerous people up to this point, and you were just sort of asking others to say, hey, you can still go ahead with the EGM, but at least have the decency to hear someone else out and then make a decision based on the new information that you have. And if you want to still go ahead with it, then go ahead with it. But how about you?
That's right. Yeah. And you know what? And as you guys well know, even when I pulled out of it, I didn't say to the guys, you guys must stop this EGM. I said, if you guys want to go ahead with it, that's your right. So I haven't said at any stage that you guys, I totally disagree with you guys going ahead with it. If you guys that are pushing ahead with it, that's your right to do it. I may disagree with it, but that's your right to do it.
So after this Zoom meeting we had on the Sunday night, where Spook and I reiterated Licuria's offer to speak to everybody, they said no. They felt an obligation to sign these regardless. I mean, I did say, well, you know what? We've got their emails and their phone numbers. We can contact them all individually and say, hey, landscape's changed a little bit. I mean, one of the things of the petition signing was it was signed that day of the Port Adelaide game, and there was a lot of angst about Buckley being a coach, and by this point, he was no longer coach. So I know some people, I mean, Spooky, you have some friends who initially felt very strongly toward the EGM, but as time went on, they went, well, hang on, a lot of the components and a lot of the reasons we wanted the EGM are now gone. Maguire, Buckley, Walsh, Guy, and you've said it before in previous rants. It's like, well, who are we trying to get rid of? And I know Hannibal Corder gets a lot of the blame, simply through guilt by association with being there for so long and his involvement or whatever involvement he might have had in the salary cap. But the one person who did contact me out of the group was Gary, who was the first person to contact me initially back in October, following my Raw articles and talking about his disenfranchisement with the club. And he says, well, I'd like to speak to Paul Licuria. And Gary spoke to Paul Licuria for a while, and then Gary called me up and said pretty much what all three of us have said. So now you have four people who have listened.
We all got a snow job. That's what it is, mate.
Well, that's the thing is, like,
four of it. I wouldn't phrase it that way.
Well, and I've said it before. I mean, we're four reasonably intelligent people outside of the club we chose to support for our lives. Reasonably. But, it's now you're getting four, people who are lifelong supporters of the club. And look, I've written for the Raw for the years, and I've had my own website, the precursor to this, the Collingwood Rant, for years. Been on the message boards. My criticism of the club is pretty well documented on the internet forever. For me to actually turn around and go, okay, you know what? Actually, I want to step back from this, and I believe people in charge should be given the right to govern now in the wake of the new administration or new presidency. That's like quite a flip for me. So I actually felt that, hey, I've said this before, I felt like it's very much like a succession plan. It was a good idea when it was initiated. The landscape changed, and we needed to reevaluate whether it was still the right decision. And I think a lot of people, if they could go back to 2010, 2011, they would have said, just give Malthouse 2 more years. It might not turn into anything, but let's just see this out. And it is a similar thing anyway. But anyway, after that Zoom meeting, so there's a deviation in the group's thinking. Spook and I are pretty much pariahs, or even more so than usual. They are really pushing on, and they talk a lot about democracy and neutrality, being neutral in this. Do you feel they're a neutral group? Either of you.
No, I don't think so, because there's like it got to a point there that there was basically guys there looking for blood. They wanted to just cull the whole board, even aside from all the information that we try to convey to them. And you know what? There's probably people on that board that don't deserve to be there anymore. But I do actually think that there is a component that should be there. There's a number of people there that who are totally focused on just getting rid of every single board member, rather than actually looking for a better result in terms of what's out there. I mean, there was a great interview by Malcolm Speed with Gerard Whateley a few weeks ago. And Malcolm actually lectures at Melbourne University all about corporate governance. He's run the International Cricket Council, chaired Cricket Australia, and he actually went through the whole Collingwood EGM scenario. And anyone who wants to have a look on the SEN website and have a listen to it, I would. Gives a great understanding of how boards should be run, how they should be run, the issues associated with having an EGM. He even raised the fact that it's quite strange these days for a sporting board to only have 7 on it, which Collingwood has at the moment. He suggested that we have 9 and don't go down an EGM, and it'll be probably beneficial for the current board or segments of that current board to actually work something out with the Brown camp and have something like, a 5-4 split either way, and mutually agree to have a split where they can all work.
Well, if not the main platform for the group is democracy, restoring democracy to Collingwood. I run the Rant Twitter socials, and I was posting that to start with, but it was just really something that sounded pretty cool. The club hasn't had democracy for 23 years. I don't think it's ever really had democracy since probably the new Magpies when they had a vote or whatever. it really is a sort of thing where the people in charge are in trust to put other people in place who will run the club to the best of their ability. I mean, the Malcolm Speed interview you talk about, he talked about Bridie O'Donnell being really a great addition to the board. So I started thinking about this because someone pointed it out on Twitter and just said, well, what's the difference between appointing someone who doesn't support Collingwood on the board and hiring a coach who doesn't support Collingwood?
Yeah.
So it's actually a pretty good point. Now, in terms of saying that, obviously none of us think the club's perfect and there still needs change to happen.
Yeah.
And, the board that we see now is probably not going to be the same board. Sorry, if you took it out the EGM and all that, but the board you see now, it would be the same board you're going to see next year or 2 years from now. It's constantly evolving and all that sort of thing. But Terts, you brought up an interesting point. If tomorrow Jeff Brown and Hannibal Corder negotiated a peace and they came up with a merged board of some sort, you brought up the point. Would the group still be pushing for an election?
Very interesting, because I think there's some people within that group that obviously want Jeff Brown to run the board and have his own, 7 people on the board. I think there's some people within that group that just want democracy, would like to see a total spill of 7 positions and don't particularly care whether it's Jeff Brown. And there's probably some people that want a mix of both. So it's and I think I threw that question up to the guys probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I didn't really get a response. I think it was, it was probably almost like in a too hard basket. What are you going to do? Because it's either, you want democracy or you don't want democracy, or do you want part democracy? And I'm probably steering towards the better the devil at this stage. And I'd like to see, and now that I'm out of it and not running the group, I'm happy to cast my flag. I'd like to see Jody Sizer, Paula Curia, and Peter Murphy remain on the current ticket. I'd like to see whoever wants to challenge come up and work with those 3. Now, if it's Jeff Brown and he puts up some great ideas, and there's 3 or 4 other people that are on his ticket that can work with those other 3, ideally, I think that would be the best result. Whether that is democracy, who knows? But I think it's an important time. We still haven't got a senior coach at the moment. We just had a great win. There would be a few coaches that would be looking at Collingwood going, this list isn't too bad, but do I want to commit under the spectre of an EGM?
Well, just on that,
it's a really good point, though. I'll just go back to that for a second there. I mean, if you were applying for a role in an organisation, and you sat there in front of the interview panel, and part of when you go for a role somewhere, it's about them sounding you out and you sounding them out. Do you think this is a place where I could work? Am I fit for this organisation? And you have the right to ask questions to try and gain that information, the same way that the employer tries to feel you out to see whether you're a fit as well. I can't see any sort of sense of stability or assuredness going into that, where you're facing a bunch of people and you're being enticed to come to an organisation where there's 5 or 6 people running the interview are going to say, we'd love to have you here. I'd love to be able to work with you, but there's every chance that we may not be in this role. It's not an air of stability that you're projecting that you want to be a part of. Now, some people may look and say, look, I'll happily take that risk. I won't do it. For me, it'd be a big concern to walk into that state of uncertainty and say, well, I'm going to commit 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, whatever contract you offer to me of my time here. There would have to be a sense that you're doing that with the buy-in of a board and all the staff there. And the staff, they're probably the easy ones to do. They're employed to work with you. There's an element there where if you want to make some influence and make some changes, that you want that sense of what it is that you agreed to at the start to be there as well. Now, obviously, that's never always set in stone. Things can change. People move, go and leave. I'm just talking about that initial confrontation between the 2 parties. I'd be going into it with some doubt.
The other thing too is that, like I see conversation in the boards, message boards, where people are saying, well, this really has no bearing on the coaching appointments. Coaches would kill to coach Collingwood. And I think, well, if you got someone like Clarkson, Brown's not going to complain with that, I imagine. But if you had like a next generation coach, let's say they got Adam Uze, the incumbent board appointed Adam Uze, and Jeff Brown's sitting there going, I don't want Adam Uze. I'm going to spill for this EGM now because I want to overturn this appointment. I actually have in mind Blake Carousella or whatever. If each potential board has a different vision for who should be coach, wouldn't the prospective coach sort of go, well, I could come here and then your board could be spilled and I might not have a job and I just left the previous one.
Yep.
So why should I come here? And I don't understand that people go, oh, no, people will come regardless, because this person might be coming into an organization where the whole administration might change in the course of a week and then suddenly find, he's not wanted. People want someone else, So I actually find that a little bit laughable that people don't think this wouldn't have an influence on prospective coaches, particularly, if we did go for a next generation coach.
Yeah, I think that is the issue. I've there's been certain media people that I know have said that Jeff Brown has sounded out a few senior coaches already, and basically said if the incumbent board appoints you, if I get in as president, I'll validate that. I won't be changing it. But yeah, I do agree. If say they went with a more of an unknown sort of coach, there could be that possibility that Brown goes, nah, I don't like that.
Yeah, and there's someone, a former member of the group, which, I won't name him, but I found it ironic that he was asking questions about strengthening, pretty much it would have strengthened the process, and then he sort of was squeezed out. And he's just saying, he wants democracy. He wants this to go back to the members and all that, but he feels that, look, at the moment, the incumbent board is the incumbent board, so they should be free to do what they want. They should be free to administrate. So,
and I think there's, in fairness to the current board too, that they did bring the AGM forward to December, and they've actually actively encouraged candidates to go up against the three vacancies. Whereas in the past, under Eddie's leadership, when there's been casual vacancies, there's never been any sort of public sort of encouragement for any candidates to come up. So so when it's come to the AGMs in the past, basically it's been no candidates, and that's why you've had these casual vacancies just ratified straight away, because there hasn't been any candidates.
Yeah.
You've gotten a lot of flack on social media for your various stances and all that. So how are you feeling at this point?
Initially it was a bit overwhelming, to be honest. I expected there was going to be a backlash, but you know what? When you've got the best intentions, like I do have, and I've made my decision, and it was a very informed decision over a period of time, and having the exposure to speaking to so many people, I'm confident in what I've done. And there's still a few people making pot shots on social media. The block buttons are good on Twitter. I had actually someone make a YouTube video about me, which was quite libelous, which I had to get shut down.
Was it Mark Robinson?
No.
Okay,
but yeah,
he said someone made a video. It wasn't stick figures.
Yeah. So no, I'm quite comfortable where I sit now, and I'm just hoping that some of the things that the club wants to implement going forward for the members. Unfortunately, this bloody COVID situation has stuffed up a lot of the plans that the club was going to roll out in the back end of the season.
Yeah.
When we saw that they sort of were going to try to get more engagement with the members.
Well, I got to throw it out there because someone on the message boards will mention it. Has the club managed this COVID situation? Have they instigated it so they don't have to roll out these plans? It's quarter behind it. It's
well, you think about it, quarter, 5 letters.
Quarter COVID.
5 letters.
Well, I heard there's a new strain called
quartered.
Quartered. The quartered version's really virulent, vibrant, dangerous. There's a Buckley version which is slow moving. Yeah, go on, Turds.
Yeah. So I copped a lot of. I reckon I copped about 20 Facebook messages initially when I decided to pull out the EGM, calling me all sorts of things and, saying I'd been bribed and all this sort of stuff. And I probably ignored probably 19 of them. It was probably one that really got to me, and I thought I had to chime back. And funny enough, I didn't get a response back after I made my reply.
Well, why didn't Eddie reply?
So no, I'm very happy where it sits at the moment, and I'm hoping we can nail this coaching position, and I think as we saw on Saturday afternoon, there's some bright sort of sparks there that like next year, we know the coach. We're going to have a lot better year next year.
Oh, well, it couldn't get much worse than this year, could it? Just in terms of...
You look at, the on-field is one thing, but, assuming that the plans are allowed to progress as is being designed, there's quite a lot of positive work being done that needs to be implemented, that's acknowledging the issues that we're all frustrated about, and actions are being put in place to implement and do something about it. Now, that's easy words, and that was, my guarded cynicism was around that sort of thing. We've heard all this before. But being exposed a little bit to some of the idea processes and things that they're willing to implement, it's actually exciting, some of the stuff off field too, if this manages to go ahead.
Yeah,
and for someone like me to say that, who's publicly expressed their opinion on a incredibly well-watched YouTube channel, to have that about face, like we were talking about before, it really should say something.
Again,
really,
at the end of the day,
yeah. We're minnows. We're just members that got angry about something that's now feeling a little bit more informed about things. And that's the wish that you can hope that the club can start doing too, is informing the members about what their plans are. And they should be proud of some of these plans. I think they're incredibly good and innovative. And that's what the club needs to become. It's got to sort of shelve that past and start building a brand new future to move into. Be a point of envy, not just fucking tell people that we're all envious of them.
I think that the initiative of having that supporters board or a members board that has a direct line with the actual board itself, I think that's going to be fabulous, to be honest. Like to cover off different sections, different membership sections of the club, the footy area, on the men's and women's side, and also the netball. That covers off all aspects of the club. I think that's going to be really beneficial.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And we'll just put in the written and authorised by whoever it is that we're going to be accused of shilling towards. But look, I think the thing is the overall message sort of is you need to go out and get informed.
Well,
I think based on not hate and anger and all those sorts of things that we've done. And look, and everyone's been agitated for change and been angry about the current state of affairs. But I think there is a definite willingness. And again, it goes back to like that whole coaching selection thing. They're trying something new, and maybe some of these innovations are trying something new that needs to happen. Well, maybe it is.
Well, the one thing, you look at, again, the message boards. Club's going to get slammed regardless what they do. You're never going to please everybody. And again, just to reiterate, not one of us thinks the club's perfect as it is. We understand that change still needs to happen, and this is an evolution that's going on. But, for mine, I walked away from that thinking, again, it's a new administration now that the former president's gone, is maybe just let these people administrate and see where they're going to take the club. And, there are options always later on if the unhappiness remains, but I don't think the unhappiness will because as Spook talked about, there's a lot of great initiatives going on, incentives going on.
And, you know, and just to back that up, I'm all for the democratic process stuff. And I think, quite simply, if you're doing your job well enough, people will vote for you. If you're not, then you've got a right to be questioned and maybe replaced. And I think that still is something that Collingwood can incorporate into the way they do things. I don't think the method of whoever can be bothered getting off their ass and going to an AGM to put their hands up in the air is adequate enough. You know, in this day and age and with technology, you can introduce a broader audience to that voting process. And I think it's something that will eventually come as well.
Yeah, well,
not that I know anything, but I just suspect that that's going to be the case.
I mean, you know, the reality is, I mean, if you look at like this being a separate administration, although a lot of the personnel is the same, is they've carried over a lot of stuff which has overshadowed anything they've tried to do. I saw a really good post that just talked about like the salary cap stuff. There's a lot of assumption that was mismanagement, but I mean, you know, Edim Guy himself keeps pushing it was a strategy. It was an all or nothing strategy pretty much. So it wasn't actually mismanagement in terms of, you know, someone can't count or they missed a column or a row or whatever the case. This was a calculated gambit, which, you know, and I'm not excusing it because I never would have done that if, you know, if I was president, which I've asked to be, but if I would never say, look, it's all or nothing, and if it doesn't work, or even if it does work, we're going to burn the club in the process. I would never spearhead that. But you know, again, you're sort of looking at like, well, they're coming out of the shadow of everything that's happened. And I spoke to you a little bit earlier, Turson, just sort of said it reminds me a bit of the new Magpies who took over in '83. By '86, they'd almost bankrupted the club. The president resigned, and the treasurer, Alan McAllister, you know, he took over, and out of the ruins of that administration, Collingwood became a really good club, you know, for 3.5 years. And the moment they won the flag, it all went to shit again. But it sort of showed that, hey, when they operated with some humility and they stayed under the radar and all that sort of stuff, they did a really good job. And, you know, like I've always been convinced if you go back to 1990, if we won that flag, and I understand why they celebrated and went out of control and all that, but if they won that flag and then just sort of went back to who they'd been in 88, 89 in terms of the admin, I think it would have been okay for the next 6 years. As it was, the typical Collingwood hyperbole and all that sort of stuff overwhelmed the club, and we unraveled spectacularly over the next 5 to 10 years.
We have a great propensity to eat ourselves.
And
Collingwood can kill Collingwood.
And that's the same thing that happened in 210 after that flag. You know, it was very similar that, look, it got success and then just blew the club up in the silly way that, hey, just, you know, be like Hawthorn. I mean, outside of Kennett and how he tends to mouth off, but, you know, they win flags, they just shut up and go do their job. I couldn't name a single Hawthorn president during their successful periods outside of Kennett. And the only reason I know Kennett is because he's like Eddie. And now people are calling for Kennett's resignation because of all the shit with Clarkson and their fantastic succession plan.
Well, I mean, today Carlton announced their EGM plans. I mean, I can only imagine Hawthorn have their schedule for next week. So it's the flavour of the month. So well done there, Turts.
Well, if I could derail Carlton, that's good. And if I could,
I don't think you need to try to.
and if somehow I've managed to derail Hawthorn, well, that's good because they've won too many premierships.
Yeah. So we should probably point out that we're available if those EGM groups need some advice. It may not be necessarily the right advice, but we're willing to destroy you. What's the word I'm looking for? Help.
Yeah. So how's your relationship, Turts, with other members in the group? Still strong?
Well, the chatter in that group sort of dropped off after a while, and it's pretty much non-existent. There's a few of the guys who are still in the group still like chat to me, which is good. I think obviously they're probably worried that if they convey some information that I might leak or something, because obviously I'm not hearing anything from those guys in regards to the EGM process. But you know, I would have thought they'd know me better. That you know, I haven't leaked out any private information in thus far from any parties. So I'm a bit disappointed about that.
Oh, well, I founded the groups, and I didn't know, like, in terms of the message group, I didn't know how I'm not sure how Facebook message groups function, especially how they continue to change. Even after I changed my mind, I didn't leave the group because I was worried it was going to actually disband the message group, and it would leave them all floundering and having to redo it. So out of sort of respect for letting them do what they wanted to do, I just sort of stayed there, but just didn't comment or anything like that. So I know I'm sort of like with you. I wouldn't be conveying anything. Spook, how's your relationship with the group or members from the group?
I'm going around to their houses nightly and egging them.
Is that all you're doing?
No, I mean, it was clear that there was a shift in the group once other tops dared think differently or independently. But that's the way it goes sometimes. It's probably a little bit disappointing, but it is what it is.
Any final thoughts?
Well, all I'm hoping is, from what I wanted initially at the start of this thing, was that hopefully we get the best result for Collingwood in the end. I'd hate to see a scenario whereby we miss out on the case that we want because an EGM gets dropped via Supreme Court injunction. When, say, if we're hypothetically going to get Clarkson or Uze or whoever it is, I'd hate to think that we're sometime in September that we're about to get Nick Dacos. We've won a couple of games towards the end of the year and we're tracking in the right direction, and then an EGM is actually dropped, and it actually disables the opportunity to get the best coach. That's one thing I'm worried about. So all I can say is that anyone who's listening to this, whether it be the guys from the group, the guys from the Collingwood board, or from the Jeff Brown group,
or Alistair Clarkson,
Eddie cops a lot of crap for a lot of things, but I think one thing he said was, guys, get together and have a discussion. What is it going to hurt for people to get together and have a discussion and actually hear each other out? And you know what? You might walk away and disagree. You might walk away and agree with some things. You might walk away and go, we're both bloody so diametrically opposed we can't work with one another. But you know what? Have the conversation.
And that's it. I totally agree. And that's that whole thing about being informed. There is some absolutely ludicrously crazy narratives running out there at the moment, conspiracy theories. It's just farcical, the level that people are using and twisting things to justify what they think they want to, essentially hear or pursue. You've got to make those informed decisions. And then that comes from listening to people. You listen to multiple camps. You can walk away thinking, well, I understand things a little bit better. It's fucking what we do in day-to-day life.
Yep.
There's no reason why it couldn't have happened here.
Yeah.
Unless
there's agendas being pushed, but who knows?
Yeah, and it's probably like, half this thing is it's probably the egos of certain people, that their egos are getting ahead of actually the right things that should be done. But you know what? Put your egos aside and just think, what's the best thing that's going to benefit Collingwood for the future?
Yep.
Don't set us back 5 to 10 years just because of your egos. Do the right thing by Collingwood.
Oh, well, I have the biggest ego I know. So, and I put that aside because I want the club to succeed and be the best version of itself. And I believe in, the 40 years I've actively followed them, although they've glimpsed their potential, they've never fully realized it. The 2 times they've won flags, I believe they should have led to mini dynasties, and they didn't because the club just unraveled for certain reasons. And I want to see them build something lasting that, in 20 years we'll look back and go, this is where it started. And I'm glad we took this course.
I mean, if Richmond can have 3 flags in a row, for God's sake, Collingwood, come on, get your act together.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll sit here and think that we'd be lucky to see 3 flags in our lifetime. If things don't change, and they need to change.
Well, we're seeing 2 and 8 losses, so we only need to see another 4 losses, and then there'll be another one if we continue going the way we go.
Well, here we get another 4 losses. We can trade them in for 1 win.
I wish.
The AFL will look after us, surely, won't they?
Yeah, they do that so well, so often. Kurtz, thanks for joining us and having an informative and enlightening discussion.
Been a pleasure, guys, and good luck with the rant for the rest of the year. Go Pies.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.